Sennheiser e835, e935, e945, and e965. What are all these microphones? How are they different? Let's dive in and take a look. Thank you to Guitar Center for providing me with these microphones so I could make this review. I've got links down below for any of these microphones if after the review you're interested in purchasing. And they have not paid me further to make this review aside from providing the microphones. Also, this video is sponsored by Learn Light and Sound, where we have courses teaching you how to make better sound and lighting for your videos. Link down below. Okay, these are not brand new microphones, but they're new to me. And I want to be very clear that I'm approaching this from a spoken word or dialogue perspective, so more along the lines of podcasting or live streaming or perhaps interviewing live. That's what I would use these microphones for. If you're looking at these from a music perspective, music vocal performance perspective, I don't have a lot to offer you here. You're dismissed. I don't want to waste your time. But if you want to stick around, that's fine too. Just be aware we're doing it from a spoken word perspective. So let's talk about these mics, but let's start with a sample from each of them. It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you were quite sure of the fact. It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you are quite sure of the fact. It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you are quite sure of the fact. It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you are quite sure of the fact. Okay, let's talk about them each. E835 is a basically a $100 microphone. It's designed as a dynamic, tight cardioid vocal mic with gentle presence boost and minimal proximity effect. A proximity effect, of course, is when you move up close on the microphone like this. What we're using here, we're actually using the 965. Basically, the E835, from my point of view, is kind of the least expensive. For those that don't have a lot of money to spend, you can get a really great sounding microphone for $100. I would say that this one has a little bit more low-end sound to it. It's not perfectly natural sounding, but it does sound nice. Yeah, it has a colored sound to it. To me, it sounded ever so slightly brittle, but still a pretty nice sound. And I think for the price, I felt like I preferred that sound over the Shure SM58, which is a really common dynamic cardioid vocal microphone as well. So that's a great option there. So if you're on a tighter budget, that's where that one sits. E935. This is meant to be a dynamic cardioid vocal mic focused on, quote, clarity, presence, and natural tone with transparent highs and warm, low mids. Yeah, I think this one sounded pretty natural. It's definitely more natural to my ears than the E835. This one runs $200, basically, so twice the price. It sounds pretty good. It's there's less difference between this one and the next one that we're going to talk about, but they're all very minor differences. So for if you want something that sounds more natural, I think the E935 is a good choice. If you need something where you're on a tight budget but you need something that sounds nice, E835. The next one up the range is the E945. This one's just $20 more than the E935. Its difference is, as described by Sennheiser, dynamic mic intended for situations needing, quote, exceptional presence and rich tonal warmth via a supercardioid polar pattern designed to cut through any mix. So this one seems a little bit more mid-forward to me. This is more of a live vocal performance in a music kind of setting. I don't think that there's a huge advantage to this one for spoken word recording like podcasts or live streams necessarily, unless there's something about having a mid-forward sound that complements your voice in a nice way. But you don't need to cut through a mix usually as much, unless you have background music playing all the time. So some live streamers do that. So maybe if you want your voice to cut through the background music a little better, this could be a good choice in that case. But not a huge difference in sound from the E935 to the E945, but just a little bit more mid-forward. And what that means in practical terms is you can cut through a mix better. Okay, E965 is the one that actually is quite different than the others. All of the others are dynamic microphones, meaning that they don't need phantom power. They have a moving voice coil that gets excited by sound waves, and that creates a little signal that goes into your recorder. You need a little bit more gain for those others. And in fact, on all of the others, for my samples, I had it gained to 55 dB of gain. most decent field recorders or audio interfaces should be able to supply that without a problem. The e965 is actually a condenser microphone. They bill it, Sennheiser bills it as a true condenser microphone for both stage and studio with a large dual diaphragm. It's switchable between cardioid and supercardioid pickups, so you can have a wider pickup pattern with less pickup on the back, or you can have a tighter, more focused pickup on the front with a little bit more of a tail, a little bit more of a pickup on the back in the supercardioid mode. It is for capturing, again, in Sennheiser's words, extraordinary detail, delivering a silky high end and a warm, well-defined low end. I do, to my ears, this one is the one that makes my voice sound the best right out of the recorder, and that's what you're hearing right now, the e965, recorded into a Sound Devices mix pre throughout this entire episode, aside from the audio samples. Obviously, you don't need as much gain for this one. We were able to gain this one at 50 dB instead of 55 dB. It does require phantom power. This one sounds the most flattering to me. It's kind of the more sophisticated sound to it. It does sound more like a studio microphone versus a live vocal performance microphone. So if I could choose, this one is substantially more expensive though. It also has a pad, so if you're recording really loud sound sources, you can essentially reduce its sensitivity, which is cool. You can change between those different polar patterns, and it does have a high-pass filter as well. So you've got those options built into the microphone. You just unscrew the grill here, and underneath you've got all of those settings. They all sound like they're the same family, but they have just very, very slight differences across them. I am impressed. I think Sennheiser's done a really nice job. If I could choose, if I had the budget, I would definitely choose the e965 for my voice. It sounds the best, but I think you could make great podcasts, live streams, or interviews with any of these. I hope that was helpful. Go ahead and leave any questions you have down below. Get out there and make some great sound, and we'll talk to you again next week.